So the next thing I think we're going to talk about is how to use this knowledge of what's happening in this wheel on a practical level when creating images in oil paint. So I'm going to go with a slightly smaller brush, still a bristle brush. These little bristle brushes, they deliver a much firmer stroke, so it's nice to use a bristle brush when you're first starting your painting because they put down a lot of paint to start with, and it kind of aids your process in going a little faster. So I think what I want to go ahead and do is do a lovely tree. I'm gonna get this piece of cat hair out of my paint. I'm gonna start with a lovely tree. And the way you always begin anything, no matter what you're doing, is you're going to start with your darkest darks. So I don't know if this tree I'm painting is really going to need to be this dark in some places, but it's much better to start dark than to start too light, because you automatically set yourself up for a weak, non-essential sort of look to whatever it is you're painting when you start with your lights first. And it also just it's not really conducive to a stronger looking whatever it is you're painting. So I want to make even darker darks in here. So I'm going to grab some of this purplish blue in here, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that in. Now keep in mind, the more darks you add to this, the more interesting your darks initially look, but also the more they're going to mix with your topical lights. You should always start with your darks first, and then move up to your midtones, your highlights, and then your highest highlights. There's that process is going to be really important to your enjoyment and success in whatever you're painting. But so really kind of work out your darks pretty well before you go into anything else. I'm gonna go ahead and put my little tree trunk in here. A few more dots of this, and I really did start out with just a purple. I mean, when you see that taken out of its little space, you can see the purple coming through. So now I have a very dark tree. It's almost like my grandma always had these purple plum trees. That looks kind of similar to that actually, but we're gonna go with a more typical tree because that's gonna be easier to see. And these would be midtones, and you can see that it is mixing with the wet paint I put down. That is not a bad thing. You are not allowed to quit on a painting because you think it's wet. Of course it's wet. That's the whole point in oil painting, is you are able to get these midtones, these little subtleties, as things automatically mix with the wet paint. That's the whole idea. That's the whole reason why oil paint is the medium, is a very popular and famous medium it has become, is because you can do this kind of thing. Acrylic doesn't allow you to do this, and watercolor doesn't allow you to do this. Pen and ink certainly doesn't allow you to do this. So this is why you're in this class, because oil paint is wet, and that's the way it is, and that's the way you're going to have to work it. Because how long have I been painting on this tree, right? What, 5 minutes now? If you just did this stuff this much, said, oh, it's too wet to work on, what else would you do the rest of the 2 hours in class? Just leave? Well, you're not going to get very much done that way, right? So wet, yes, it's wet, and that's a good thing. I'm gonna go up here, get some higher highlights. Now the trick to controlling this kind of chaos when you're working wet on wet is not to blend. Almost no blending at all, really. I could say that with relative confidence as a beginner, because I know that so many people, there's this thing about blending, that they want to blend. They see these imperfections in here, and our human mind likes things to be perfect, right? Likes things to be solid and secure and stable. But you have to stop yourself. You have to stop and think, wait a minute, these little discrepancies are helping me. These little things are supposed to be here. And you can see that it kind of is starting to look like a tree, right? Kind of a cartoony tree though, right? So if you want a cartoony tree, that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and take some of this lighter green still. And when we have, this is not a high highlight. This is kind of just a regular highlight, right? Because I can still go up to here to achieve a very high highlight, or even here to achieve a very high highlight. So this is just kind of like your garden variety of highlight. And you can see as I go down, it is mixing, and that's to be expected. That's okay. That's what we want, really. I'm gonna grab a little bit more because I feel like this mass should be coming out a little bit more. And as you can see, the more light we add into these branches and leaves, the more it appears to come this way, right? These ones, they're a little darker, they appear to go that way. Not all lighting situations are going to give you this perfect excuses, but to use this technique, but it's okay, and we can just go ahead and do it in here. So now we have kind of a regular looking tree, right? I'm going to go and just get some high highlights though. Maybe some high highlighted yellow. I'm going to go ahead and just go for a little bit of white here and there. I didn't really put enough white on my palette, but I can go ahead and get more, stick it there. And the white has that desaturation effect, right? So we have to be kind of careful how we use it. So now I'm kind of leaning toward this thing where my light is coming this way, right? So I kind of want to leave this in a darker state. And I feel like maybe the tree could be warmer, the tree trunk part could be warmer. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of red to it. Green and red work very well together. They are opposites on the color wheel, sort of like wherever you would consider the opposite on the color wheel. It would be, I mean, it looks to be blue, but it's because I didn't structure this quite right. But if you look straight across here, that red and green are perfectly complementary, just like the purple and the yellow are perfectly complementary, right? And then we go over here and you can get other complementary colors, right? So it's kind of good to have a general knowledge of how the color wheel is structured just for your practical use in oil painting. So now we have this interesting tree trunk color in here. I'll go ahead and add just a dab of this very dark blue just to see what happens. I'm going to add more of this darkish blue in here. So I'm going to get that a really kind of exaggerated sense of roundness, right? Where these darks are tucking around this globy tree. Not all trees are going to be so globy, but it doesn't matter because you can still use these same principles in creating it. So now we have kind of a tree, right? It looks like an acceptable tree even. To me, I would still do more to this. Like one thing that I might even do just now is take some orange to it. I love warm colors in the cool colors. Gives it a nice little poke. Kind of naturalizes things a little bit. When everything's a cool color, kind of makes things look kind of frozen. Artificially so, even. So I'm just going to go ahead and just stick a little bit of orange in there. And that is how we would use a color wheel to make a tree. Of course, my shadow is now going to be falling this way, actually. I should pay attention to what I'm doing. You have a little tree. It's a happy little tree.